One of the first things I wanted to talk about is how Rudolf Steiner explains of the Kamaloka, and that's life between death and rebirth. So according to Steiner, the Kamaloka is like our astral plane, which you can imagine it being the fourth density, where all thoughts, desires, and emotions reside. But not just that, other beings of other dimensions can actually come through the Kamaloka. So when we dream, we experience the Kamaloka, and other beings can come, if they be benevolent or malevolent, either or, those beings can interact with you in the Kamaloka, which is very interesting because there's a lower Kamaloka and a higher Kamaloka in his descriptions. And when we are in the lower Kamaloka, it's almost like a darkness. Matt, is there anything that you would like to add to that?
So that darkness in the lower Kamaloka, it's usually filled with desires or attachments or addictions. Those beings, like Trinity was saying, they could be trapped in addictions and be playing those out in the Kamaloka as well. And you might encounter them, but that's where you're going to experience more of the lower beings. And as you go into the higher astral, into the higher Kamaloka, that's when you start to leave those earthly desires.
Yes. And another thing about the Kamaloka that we found that was very interesting is that you can imagine it like a crucible. So in order for our soul to ascend back to what he considers the Devachan, and the Devachan is the place where all higher vibrational beings reside, like angels, archangels, guides, your loved ones. In order to get to that space, you have to
cleanse, purify yourself.
Like you have to burn away all the impurities, like you would imagine in a container, like a crucible, or like dross, he explains it. And like emptying yourself of all of this energy or these past experiences that you've been holding on to that no longer obviously serve you in those realms. And that I found was so, so interesting. But it's not a punishment. It's just like a spiritual education. Another thing that he was saying is that you actually get to experience all of the negative things that you've done to someone else. And not from your perspective, but from their perspective. From their standpoint, not from yours. So you get to see how you impacted that person and how you hurt that person and how that person hurt others because of the actions that you implemented, which is a very interesting thing to see while you're in the Kamaloka. So you could spend 25 years in the Kamaloka because time is irrelevant when you're there.
Time doesn't exist the way it does in our density,
yes.
In the Kamaloka.
Yes.
It's some cultures even refer the Kamaloka to being like the purgatory phase, but you still actually exist in it even when you're alive. So it's not a place where you go when you die. It's actually somewhere you could experience when you go to sleep. And when people go through experiences of near death, they end up actually being in the Kamaloka and traveling through. You can't right away enter the Devachan in the higher realms because, like Trinity was saying, you need to purge yourself of all of those lower
impurities.
Exactly, because you can contaminate the higher realms. And it's not to say that they can't come down and interact with you. They actually do. You could be active in dissolving the karma that you've accumulated from your past lives, because now when you're actively conscious and aware when you are in astral travel or when you're in regular everyday life, you have a chance to either work through your karma or speed it up. You don't have to wait until you're dead and then you have a reverse life review. You don't need to do that. You could actually start working on it, and that's right now.
And it's interesting, like this is my own point of view here, like how a lot of orthodoxy religions will say that you can only become pure when you pass on. But in actual fact, all ancient traditions, mystery school teachings, they all allude to the fact that you can do it in one lifetime. So you can release yourself of these impurities in this lifetime. And I think that if you are able to do that, by the time you do get to the Kamaloka, it will be an easier process for your soul to go through, which I remember listening to one of Rudolf Steiner's lectures, and he said that people who overdose or die die in a way where it's
sudden or tragic.
Yes, sudden or tragic. Or even people with NDEs who are in lower states of consciousness, they will experience the Kamaloka as pure darkness, which is so trippy for me to like conceptualize, because I actually had a friend who had told me when she was, I'm going to go kind of into a story that she said to me, but she was overdosing on a drug and she saw absolutely nothing. And obviously this scared her into thinking that there's nothing after this, like after this life. But she was just in a space where her body was literally just trying, or like her soul was literally just trying to get to the higher realms, because it was something sudden and not predicted. And so so when people are reporting that they're just seeing like complete darkness, it just means that they're in a lower state of consciousness at the time. It doesn't mean that there's absolutely nothing after this life, which is what the point I'm trying to make with this.
There's the lower astral darkness, and then there's the higher astral darkness. The way you distinguish that is if you're in darkness and you're in a dream state, or you just had an NDE, what you could do is observe. And if you observe that you're feeling maybe restlessness and just lower desires that typically associate with the things on earth that aren't of a higher nature. And when I say of a higher nature, you're not going to be in bliss. If you're in this darkness and you're experiencing anger or frustration or even confusion, that's a good sign that you're in the lower. And if you're feeling like more of a blissful state and more in alignment with higher energies, you're going to feel that, and you're going to know that, hey, maybe I'm in the higher. But if you go into a dream or you go into an NDE and you do see this blackness, sense where your feelings and your emotions are. And if you have a lot of negative ones, then you might be in the lower one.
Yes. I want to digress from this concept just for a little bit, because there was another concept that Rudolf Steiner actually has come to my realization, because I just started diving into Rosicrucianism and esoteric Christianity. I've kind of been on a path of more like Eastern traditions, but understanding this has actually been such a mind-altering thing for me. So I'm not sure if any of you guys are familiar with Dolores Cannon's work, or if you're familiar with any of the Vedic teachings. They talk about how the evolutionary process of consciousness, because we are ancient souls. Our souls have been here for billions of years. Many of us are reincarnated souls. We are ancient. And so Dolores Cannon, she explains that we once have been a consciousness of a mineral. And then think about that. If we are a mineral, we are the most densest form of consciousness, right? And she explains it like you live for a very long time, millions of years, moving very slowly, okay? Then our consciousness upgrades itself to the next stage. And the next stage is the plant kingdom, and we exist as a unified consciousness, connected through mycelia or through just like the roots of the earth or whatnot. And we are like a hive mind consciousness. We are nature. And then we move on to an insect kingdom where we're still hive mind. And then we move into the animal kingdom where you are still hive mind, but you have the opportunity to upgrade your consciousness when you have a human companion. So for an example, if you have a pet and you and your pet have this karmic relationship, you as a human are actually influencing your pet in order to evolve that soul into the next evolutionary process, which potentially could be human. And then so the most fascinating thing, because I understood that concept from Dolores Cannon, and why I'm explaining this here is because Rudolf talks about the 9 ranks of angelic beings. He points to the next evolutionary jump for humanity is to become an angel. And so think about it in this way. So he has 9 ranks. He says Angel is the next evolutionary jump for humanity, spirits of life. Then he says archangels, spirits of fire. They are the closest to humanity. They can affect us in the most easiest ways. I know, Matt, you want to maybe jump in?
Yeah, I know that from what he explains is angels and archangels have direct influence between us. They affect us most closely. The other entities and the other higher ranks, they don't necessarily have the direct influence that the archangels and the angels do. Sometimes you'll see synchronicities in ways like seeing 1111, or you'll think of someone and they'll call you. There's little signs that are going to happen. And they say that angels and archangels can come through electricity.
And also our glands.
And our glands.
That's why we feel clairsentience, like we'll get the shivers, our hair standing up on the back of our spine.
The feeling in your stomach.
Yes, the
intuition. These are all expressions of higher beings.
Yes, and actually I want to just kind of touch on what you are saying here, Matt, because when I was just explaining what Dolores Cannon's concept of soul evolution, and then now we're going into Rudolf Steiner's understanding of soul evolution. So for an example, he just talked about the exousiae, which would basically be, so it would go angels, archangels, archai, and then exousiae, and then it would move into diames, dominions, thrones, cherubim, and seraphim. And I want to just explain to you how God is experiencing itself through every form and every density as an expression until we formulate back to source, back to the Almighty.
Basically, everything on earth exists as an expression of higher realms, and humans are the ones who have the free will and could go back up to express and one with God.
Right, and I just want to state that everything is fractal in that way, because think about God expressing itself as a mineral, the most densest form. And then as we evolve in our soul, we become higher and higher dimensional beings, and then eventually we return back to source, right? Because once you become a seraphim, you return back to God, right? That's the closest form. So according to Steiner, humans are meant to evolve into these hierarchies. And I just want to point out that there could potentially be factions on this planet that want to hinder the evolutionary process of humanity's growth, spiritual growth, the growth of the soul. It's really important that our souls experience reincarnation in order to learn the lessons so that we could then bring it into the next life.
Not only do we have human consciousness and karma to deal with on an individual level, but we also have the planetary consciousness and karma that we have to upgrade and level up.
I'm so glad that you just brought up the planetary situations, because Rudolf Steiner basically explains that the planets are an expression of the ranks of angels that I just went through, and they could be considered thrones or dominions. And so if you think about reality in itself, like if you look at astrology, if some of you are familiar with astrology, I'm not an astrologer, but I understand astrology to the point where I understand that as above, so below, so within, so without, and that we are reflections of the planets that we have situated inside of us. So for an example, I can just use an example right now. I have a lot of Scorpio placements, and Scorpio is ruled by Mars. And what Mars does is it takes a lot of action, right? Mars rules action and war. And so there's always a positive and a negative balance to, there's always a positive and negative polarity to those planets. They could be upright or downright, just like how we are in humans. Even when you think about the tarot, it could be upright or downright, right? You could be acting inverted or upright. What I'm trying to get to is that the planets are affecting us internally. And Rudolf Steiner understands that, because he was saying that they are expressions of higher vibrational beings expressing itself through us as well. Another thing that I just wanted to throw out there is that when we talk about these other ranks, these angels, this is my own point of view. This is not what Rudolf Steiner says, but in my own point of view, I see, like, you know how he explains that we are going to evolve into this next evolutionary stage. Mm-hmm. I see it as other beings who have already evolved to that stage. So there could be like Lyrian beings or Palladian beings or Arcturian beings. These are all angels, beings that have lived the human experience and now have transcended to a higher vibrational density. So I found that very, very fascinating. That's how I equate angels and ETs, extraterrestrials, being of the same vibrational frequency because they transcended the human life.
Every epoch, until now, we've descended into the most dense physically we've ever been. Places like Atlantis and Lemuria, they didn't exist in such physicality. So the Egyptians, the inheritors of the wisdom traditions, they had thought of the planets as representations of these higher beings and these higher archetypes that we are born into. And then these planets are what affect us and dictate what kind of karma we have to experience as humans.
Absolutely. And you can think about your natal chart, for an example. Your natal chart is a snapshot of the sky at the time you were born, but it's also an internal snapshot of what planets reside mostly inside of you.
And so what kind of karma you might be facing.
Yes, and what kind of energy are you going to be putting out or receiving from? So, like for me, I'm receiving a lot of Mars energy because I have a lot of Scorpio placements. So Mars really affects me. And if someone had a lot of, let's just say if someone was a Taurus or a Libra, they had a lot of Venus placements, Venus would affect them, and so on and so forth. And Rudolf explains that the planets are these higher vibrational beings. They're sentient consciousness. One thing that I find very interesting too is that Earth is the only receiver. All other planets are giving off a tone or a vibration or a frequency, but Earth is receiving it all, and all of us on Earth are receiving like an antenna from all of the planets that are affecting us within ourselves, which is super fascinating, I find, being on planet Earth mm-hmm. and us receiving all of this. But yes, it's such a powerful way of understanding that through reincarnation, our next evolutionary standpoint is to be of a higher vibrational being. And
like, you don't have to die to work. You actually can do it right now.
Yes, you don't have to die to resolve your karma. So another thing, oh my God, I found this really cool too. I love sharing this with everyone who's watching. Rudolf talks about different epochs, and Matt had touched upon it. And during certain epochs, we evolved certain glands. Because remember how we were saying before that the angels work through our glands. It makes sense that they would work through our glands because our pineal is a gland, our pituitary is a gland. We also have sexual organs, which are glands. And so basically, when we were more in a primitive state of consciousness, we were developing our sexual organs. And as we move through different epochs, we develop different organs, different sensory perceptions, different abilities he talks about, and how he says in the 4th millennium, we will develop the heart chakra. And right now in our epoch currently, we are developing the mind, the pineal gland, which is making so much sense because consciousness is really, really on the forefront of everyone's conversations nowadays. And we are in the epoch of developing that, which mimics and mirrors the epoch of the Egyptian times as well. But I just would like to say that when we go into the 4th millennium, which is year 3999, and develop the heart chakra, once we complete that development, we will then become these evolutionary beings, which will be 5th density, 6th density. We will move from the 3rd, like we will transcend the 3rd density, is what Rudolf is explaining.
We're on the slope upwards now. We're cultivating our clairvoyant abilities to sense these things. If you ever had a gut feeling, if you ever had intuition, these are these things coming through. Other ancient traditions that taught you how to cultivate your spiritual centers or your chakras, the Vedic traditions were from the root upwards. The Christian esoteric traditions are typically from the crown downwards. But the Rosicrucians, they said this future human, they develop from the center and outwards. So developing from the heart.
Yes, and it's almost like, I know I'm talking a lot about Dolores Cannon here. I see a lot of overlays in the things that she has described, and even with the Rosicrucianism. It seems as if, this is what she says, that there was a call out to the universe for higher vibrational beings to come and help planet Earth, because planet Earth was stuck in karma. And so it just makes sense that there's a bunch of initiates from higher vibrational places and dimensions that are here now during this turn of the century to bring about the golden age of consciousness. And Rudolf Steiner himself said that all of the knowledge that he was putting out during that time, during the 1920s, that it was actually for the people of the turn of the century, because he said that all of the initiates from all ancient traditions would be here and now to bring the golden age of consciousness. And I find it so interesting too that Dolores Cannon's work actually overlays that as well. And she says that there was a call out to all of the higher vibrational beings. And it's like the people who are leading the way right now, like I'm sure there's many light workers listening to this right now, you are from a different dimension, a different time, a different place. And you have already developed these abilities. And you are now here to be the way showers for humanity so that we can now bring the golden age.